Hello and welcome to OPA GCSE Sociology, and today we're going to be looking at what are the different types of schooling. So just to get started, we've got a 4-mark question here. So identify and describe one feature of the correspondence principle. So if you look back over the third lesson on here, the Marxist perspective of school's purpose, then you'll see what the correspondence principle is, and you need to use that die approach. So define it, say what it is, say its importance, so say how it can impact society, and then sort of talk about just sort of as I said, how it can impact society, but add a bit of detail, and then just add an example in to illustrate your importance. Okay, so give yourself 5 minutes, and then if you feel like you want me to mark it, by all means bring it in when you're next in. So just pause the video, give yourself 5 minutes. Right, so before we jump in and look at those different types, just to go over what you do before primary school. So in the UK, children between the ages of 4 to 18 are entitled to a free education. Children are entitled to join a state-funded nursery from the age of 3 on either a full or a part-time basis. This becomes compulsory, however, from the age of 5. Some schools offer nursery classes within their primary school as an alternative to the nurseries. So just get a note down what's happening before the age of 4. So just the fact that it's the fact that they can go to a nursery class or a nursery per se as an option, part-time or full. Right, so different types of schooling, sort of a chronology here to some extent. So we've got nursery schools, age of 3 or 4, they have their own teacher, and they can be either state or privately funded. And then nursery classes, so they're attached to a primary school, and they share the same teachers and staff. So it's very similar to a nursery school. It's just within or attached to a primary school. And then obviously primary school, so age 4 to 11, children start the early year curriculum, followed by Key Stage 1 and 2, which is national curriculum. And we have secondary schools, so this is aged 11 to 16. It can be up to 18 if it's a sort of like a sixth form secondary school. And they're taken through Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 national curriculum. And then finally, we have sixth form colleges. So that's age 16 to 19, depends on when you're born in the year. And then pupils will either study A levels or BTECs or some sort of further educational course. So just get a note of that. I'll leave it on the screen just for a moment if you want to pause the video. Right, so these are the different types of school, and we're going to just go over it bit by bit. You don't have to write it down as a mind map. You can articulate it in whatever way you want, but just to let you know before we jump into it, the different types of schooling. All right, so let's jump in. So the first one, state-funded comprehensive schools. So these are government-funded schools. They aim to give educational access to every student and give the same quality of education to all. Their students are admitted from the local catchment area. They teach the national curriculum and are regulated by Ofsted. Okay, so you'll notice a pattern here. We're going to look at the funding, what sort of things they cover, are they regulated as we go on. So OPA, like many schools in Thurrock, used to be a state-funded comprehensive. So this is just where the money is going from the government to the local council and then to the school. And then when it means local catchment, so generally speaking, there's a bit more flexibility with this now, but it will be places will be allocated to those in the local area, generally speaking. And then Ofsted. So Ofsted is the regulatory board for schools. Just they come around every 4 to 5 years, generally, just to see sort of what the rating of the school would be. Right, then we move on to specialist schools. So these are schools that place an extra emphasis on 1 or 2 subjects. So these schools received additional funding from in an attempt to raise achievement. So they will teach national curriculum and Ofsted related stuff. But when I mean specialist schools, I don't mean anything like for those who have additional needs or anything like that. This is types of schools that are with a main emphasis. So it might be that there is I don't know, a football school or a tennis school, or it might be the school is a performance school. They have to do the national curriculum, but they now have an extra emphasis on something else. So to give you an example, at one point, potentially, Ormiston Park Academy was linked with West Ham. And there was talk of whether it was going to be a football orientated school. And if they were, they would have been a specialist school. So they would have got some extra funding from somewhere else, I guess West Ham or something like that, or the FA. And they would have to do the national curriculum. So they'd have to do English, math, science, and offer other subjects. But they might have more hours a week allocated specifically to football and might have specific courses around that. Then there's academies. Now, academies are what most schools are now and have been probably for the last just under, maybe a little bit over 10 years. And these are what most schools are in Thurrock, in fact. So these are independently managed schools set up by sponsored businesses or set up by sponsors from business, faith, or voluntary companies or groups. They work in partnership with the government. So you can see here that the differences between this and the state comprehensive is the trust or the company, the charity is acting almost like the middle person there. So instead of the funding going to the local government or local council, it's going straight to the trust, and the trust allocates the budget to the school. So OAT is our main one. So Ormiston Park Academy is a part of the Ormiston Academy Trust. Now they are a trust that concentrates not just on schooling, but also programs around deprived areas as well. Just to give you an example of that. And generally speaking, academies will take a cut, sort of like a service fee, in order to function and keep going. And generally, they're in favour at the moment because there is a lot of control or lots of flexibility given to OAT and these academy trusts, as opposed to being regulated by local councils. So they'll have more control over their rules, their finances, their curriculum, teachers' pays, a range of things. But they do still need to stick to the national curriculum and are still regulated by Ofsted. Okay, next one. So this is different from a specialist school. So special schools. So these are schools aimed at supporting statemented or SEN, so special educational need pupils. So this includes both learning and physical disabilities. Some are state funded, some are private. So it's not just schools that are perhaps with children who may have sort of EHCPs in terms of maybe might suffer from say autism or have ADHD or something like that, ADD. It can also be barriers in terms of things like hearing schools or sight impairment schools. So there's a range of things there in how they are supporting. Again, like I said, they could be state or private funded. They also have to stick to the national curriculum and are regulated by Ofsted. Okay, so free schools. Now there's not really much difference here between preschools and really academies. So these are schools set up by teachers, communities, charities, parents, universities, or faith groups when there's a demand in the area for schooling. So a bit like what academies are. They're funded directly by the government. And again, it's greater freedom over things like teacher pay, finances, curriculum, rules. But again, they're still regulated by national curriculum and Ofsted. Okay, faith schools. So faith schools run like most other schools, but with curriculum, admissions criteria, and staff, perhaps reflecting religion. Now, they don't have to have all of those things. And in fact, we've got a local school, the convent in Grays, that does have, it's a Catholic school. It does have nuns who teach there, but you can be a member of staff and not be religious or not be Catholic. And there are many students there who are not Catholic. But there's generally sort of an emphasis on the religions, and that might be extra curriculum, that might be facilities, that might be whatever it may be. So some are state funded, some are private, and again, national curriculum and Ofsted regulated. Okay, grammar schools. So these are free schools, so there's no fees to pay for this. But students are picked based on their ability. So they might have to do something like the 11 plus, so an exam before they go there to see whether they are seen in their eyes to have the academic capabilities. And it's supposed to, it was originally set up, it's a bit controversial now to some people, grammar schools, but they were originally set up with the intention of being an example of meritocracy, this idea of lifting poor kids who were academic, who were talented and hardworking, lifting them out of poverty and giving them facilities that were perhaps better than, say, a state school in their local area. A little bit controversial now because there's an argument to say that maybe middle-class parents who can't quite afford private schools might encourage, they might get the best out of their child through things like tutoring and things like that, that then allows them to go on to grammar schools. But again, they're like most schools. It's just a bit more selective about the students, and there's a national curriculum and Ofsted regulations. So next one. So this is independent or private schools. So this is slightly different. It is a fee-paying school. They have their own curriculums and their own admissions. So you have some private schools. So for example, in Brentwood, where it'll be fee-paying, there may or may not be some sort of test to get in. There's even more exclusive ones in the country. I can't remember the one that comes to mind. But there are some that are so exclusive that you have to have some form of status, or you might have to apply from birth. And they're really competitive. I think it's called Harrow School. But yeah, there's examples there where it's sort of really, Eton College, that's an example. So yeah, there might be really exclusive schools where it's not just based on money, but also your status. So they're funded privately through parents or scholarships. They have their own forms of assessments and regulations. So they don't necessarily have their Ofsted. They don't necessarily have a national curriculum. But it's not to say that they don't use that at times. Right, so they're the different types. Feel free to go back in the video and sort of go back and cover anything you missed out. Here's a range of 3-mark questions and how they could be answered. I mean, you'll notice that most of them are exactly the same. It's just that they're changing the type of school. Okay, so see if you can master a few of those. And that is the end of the video. Feel free to bring them along for me to mark when you're next in lesson.